Welcome to the latest Tablet podcast. My name is Ruth Gledhill and I'm Assistant Editor of the Tablet. And with me again is Liz Dodd, a sister of St Joseph of Peace. And we have both been very busy, haven't we, Liz? And I know you've been to Amsterdam recently and you've become something of an expert on the new document, or the first major document from Pope Leo, Dilexi.
That's right. So I was in Amsterdam for an absolutely amazing gathering. You know it's amazing because it's sort of like all over the tablet with my byline on it. So I was invited to go to an international consultation on LGBTQ inclusion in Christian churches. And it was sort of a gathering of Christians within the LGBTQ community and also allies and supporters, and I use this word very loosely, influencers. But I think the idea was to gather people together to first of all talk about anti-gender narratives and hate speech and conversion practices within churches, and then to sort of foment a kind of counter to that to work out how we can build bridges. And there was some really interesting research published at the event, which is in the home news pages, which found that the Catholic Church in England and Wales is among the most inclusive in Europe, it was only European churches that were polled, which I think to me came as a bit of a surprise, but having sort of dug into the research, makes sense.
Me too. And when you sent your copy in, and so I was editing it for online and for the magazine, and a really interesting story and beautifully written, as always, Liz. I'm glad that becoming a nun hasn't affected your writing ability. Anyway, it was really well done. But when I saw the figures and the stats about England and Wales being kind of up there at the top as being best for LGBTQI people, I thought there must be an error there. Maybe she's put in an extra kind of figure or something like that. And so I actually went back and read the report to double check it was correct, and it was.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it?
And so Cardinal Nichols, who just before we started recording, we were talking about, the fact that his retirement is imminent any day now. It must be, surely. Yeah. One of the good things he has done, I think, he's always been very positive in his actions towards that community. And it's really interesting to see that reflected in this report and in the stats. Yeah.
And I think one of the really interesting, so the report is an index of churches throughout Europe across Protestant, Orthodox and Catholic communities. And it indexes them according to 52 different indicators, which are things about inclusion, both at a sort of hierarchical level and a grassroots level. And for me, the really interesting takeaway was that the last time they compiled this index, which I think was in 2020, the Catholic Church in England and Wales was much lower down. Now, there are methodological reasons for that. They've introduced different questions, and there was a new co-researcher in England and Wales who helped out. But the jump, I had something extraordinary, like I want to say 15%. Read the news story, it's in that. But it's a really significant improvement. Now, as you say, some of that I think is because there's been a long time practice of inclusivity in the church, and a lot of that has been to do with Cardinal Nichols and the what we used to call the Soho masses, the sort of availability of community masses for LGBTQ people in London. But I think really the takeaway and what came out of discussions that I had at the gathering was that it's not the hierarchy that determines inclusivity, it's the grassroots.
Oh, that's interesting, yeah.
Yeah, and like the hierarchy can impact the grassroots. So, for example, we had Christians from countries in Eastern Europe where their religious hierarchy wouldn't allow LGBTQ groups or communities to gather at all, let alone in churches, let alone celebrate Mass or Eucharist or worship. So there is definitely an interplay between hierarchy and grassroots. But I think what we've seen in England and Wales is a thriving of the grassroots pastoral support And I think that's because, broadly speaking, on a parish level, Catholics in England and Wales are tolerant, kind, generous, good-minded people. And when there's a space to express that, space given admittedly by the hierarchy, you come up with this fantastic result.
Yes.
So the German Catholic Church was the top of the Catholic churches, if you like, and then the Belgian Catholic Church and England and Wales were joint second, third together. The top of all the Catholic churches was, I think it's called the Metropolitan Church of Vienna, which I think might be an expressly LGBTQ church, but I'm not absolutely sure. And then England and Wales was sort of 22nd, 23rd overall of all churches. But within the Catholic context, remarkably good, really remarkably good.
Absolutely fascinating. And at this conference, which I know you've written about in your column as well, which subscribe to the tablet, and you can read Liz's fantastic regular columns there. Was there a call to action, either in Pope Leo's direction or in the direction of ordinary lay people like me?
There really was. There's something else I loved about this conference. I'm not a big conference person because I don't like just sort of getting together for the sake of it, just to rehash ideas. But this was quite definitely geared at individual and collective calls to action. Because we were there in a sort of alliance building capacity, a lot of our calls to action were to do, for me as a journalist and as a sister, with making more space and lifting up the voices of people who aren't always listened to or heard. So, and then the sort of interplay with that was I was encouraging people in those more vulnerable communities to fight, to trust, and this sounds like such a terrible thing to say if you're not on kind of our side of it, like just to trust the media when you find media that you trust, so like the tablet or independent journalists, because those alliances can be really valuable in terms of countering hate speech and countering dangerous narratives and things like that. But certainly from the sort of the papal perspective, I think this probably impacted England and Wales, but impacting the Catholic Church's results as a whole was Pope Francis, and the way that Francis talked about LGBTQ people significantly and measurably affected the way that Catholics were treated in their home countries, way more than I expected. And as you know, like I always went quite hard on Pope Francis and said that he hadn't gone far enough and all this, and I still don't think he went far enough. But looking at the impact of just the little he did has given me a new energy for sort of pushing for that sort of change higher up as well, because it really, on one level it means that people in civil partnerships can have their relationships blessed in England, say, one day. But in another country, it's the difference between being beaten up and murdered for your identity. Mm-hmm. It's a really significant thing we're talking about.
And although his famous quotes on the plane back from his very first press trip when he became Pope, "Who am I to judge?" Although they didn't change canon law and they didn't change practice officially, that was to come further down the line when this kind of unofficial sanction for gay blessings on an individual basis was given. It changed the narrative, didn't it? And I think that it's really interesting what you say about how that impacts at the grassroots of the church.
I think because it creates space for other leaders, and Francis was probably really aware of this, that when he moved, even in his language, he removed a barrier that might have existed in clerical culture or in different countries' religious contexts and things like that. So even something that maybe to me feels as grudging as, oh, who am I to judge, for some priest somewhere gives them acres of space within which they can manoeuvre. So it was part of, we hear a lot about Francis perhaps not being so good at decentralising power as we might like, but in some ways that was a decentralisation. He didn't control the narrative of change, he just made space for people who wanted change to have conversations about it.
Do you think Pope Leo has a similarly sophisticated understanding of how to use language to its best effect? Because, of course, Pope Francis English wasn't even his first language, and yet the things he said, the impact of them was just as strong in whatever language they were translated to. Pope Leo, although he speaks in Italian often in Rome, when he's on official church business, his first language is English. Do you think, are the signs that he is as similarly impactful with his use of language as Francis was able to be?
He's certainly very guarded. He's skillful in the way he uses language in a way, in a sort of political way, if I can say that. So particularly around things like Gaza, maybe less so with Ukraine, but and less so with the persecution of immigrants in America. But broadly speaking, he's been quite cautious in his language, which made me nervous about this new exhortation, Dilexit Te, because I thought, he's written, he's built on an exhortation that Francis had been working on about the poor, and even the title of it, I think Dilexit Te translates as for I have loved the love of the poor. And I was like, that's not radical, is it? You know, Charles Dickens was into that. You know, we need a pope who's talking about, and this would be a terrible title, but like ripping apart the structures that mean that some people are poor in the first place. So I have to say, I didn't have great expectations going into Dilexit Te, but I was wrong. It's a really, really good document.
Mm. And some of it, like this pit of filth he talks about, or cesspit, you sort of think, well, you can almost spot the Francis bits in it, because, of course, Francis was working on it when he died.
Yeah, I think you can. There's a quote that I love that I build on a lot in the column, where the document says something like, the poor are not a sociological object, but the very flesh of Christ. And I was like, now that, I think that's Francis. That very visceral language, the sort of language where you can imagine he's thought it up in Spanish and then someone's translated it into English, but it still has that sort of like vigor is there. But it is still powerful as a document. Pope Leo doesn't seem to have muted it, in my sense. And I've heard on the grapevine that the Catholic worker movement, or certainly the Catholic workers that I'm in touch with, think it's good. And that is really high praise.
That is absolutely is. And that also means that it might become foundational in an important way.
Right. I mean, it could be the next Rerum Novarum, it could be the next Gaudium et Spes. It pulls out of both of those some really controversial things. For example, there's a bit that it quotes from Gaudium et Spes talking about private ownership, and it's one of the most controversial passages, and it talks about ownership, sort of not private ownership not necessarily being a good in itself, and sometimes contributing to sort of suffering and disorder, and therefore the poor, I hate using that as a sort of group, but you know what I mean, in extreme necessity are allowed to take what they need from the riches of others.
And I think we really are seeing his formation in Peru here in Latin America, aren't we? And right. This is the Pope who is not North American in the way that we understand North Americans to be. This is a Pope who's been shaped in a completely different part of the world. The same Absolutely. Type of world that shaped Francis, really. Yeah.
And that really, for someone like me, is really heartening. Going through the document and thinking, it's called for the love of the poor. What we're going to see is a sort of call to generosity and charity and, this sort of like slightly anodyne Victorian morality. Mm. And it's not there. It's
bring on the revolution, isn't it?
Yeah. It's anti-capitalist. And the great thing is, Pope Leo knows that that's what it is.
I know, and it's so refreshing in this day and age with everything that's happening in America and in the UK and the city, and with the resurgence of the far right, across
Yeah.
so many areas of life, especially in the areas of wealth and politics
Yeah.
and work, really.
Yeah.
To see this brave man, I think he's a really brave man,
Yeah.
coming out like this and
Yeah.
putting forward this very radical agenda,
Yeah.
right out of the books of of Catholic social thought.
Yeah. Because I think it's one thing to write an exhortation about economics. And for someone like me who gets quite sort of exorcised about economics, it's just a good thing on its own. But it's an odd thing to put out now when the sort of dominant conversation is about hate speech and the far right and radicalisation and that kind of thing. But one thing that I learned from the conference in Amsterdam was that finance and hate speech and the far right are far more entangled than I think I realised. We had a brilliant presentation by a new organisation called Faith and Democracy, unpicking sort of the roots of hate speech and anti-gender narrative. And it was mortifying to see how many Catholic groups with, the names that always slightly for me ring alarm bells, like, I have to make sure I don't use an actual one here, but love of the family or protection of the children. Do you know what I mean? Organisations like that tied back to money in America, money from oligarchs in Eastern Europe, money, and I didn't know this was an area, old money from European aristocracy. So there's a really strong link between established capitalism and these new hate speech, far right, anti-gender, anti-migrant narratives. So I think this exhortation is well timed in all areas, because it unpicks some of those narratives and those roots.
And I think one of the very interesting things that's happening at the moment is a very evident attempt to bring the American political narrative concerning money and the far right and those types of issues over to this country, and to try and set off the same culture wars here. And I think we saw an example of that in the debate over the sticker art or transfers at Canterbury Cathedral.
Oh.
I refuse to call it graffiti. Maybe we could call it graffiti style stickers. Basically, it was stickers. They just put stickers on the columns. And Paddy Hudson, our new Rome correspondent, wrote a very good newsletter about it this week. If you want to subscribe to the Tablet newsletter, just go to our website, thetablet.co.uk, and scroll down to the bottom and you can find a link to subscribe to our free twice-weekly newsletter. But Paddy wrote this excellent thing, and he concluded that in the end it would have actually been better if they had put real graffiti.
Great.
A few real scratches into that medieval stonework.
Because am I right that J.D. Vance chimed in?
He did. And then Elon Musk kind of agreed with him. That's what made it a story, really.
Yeah. The guy's visited the Cotswolds once and suddenly he thinks he's got an opinion about listed buildings. But I think you're right, and I think we've seen it also in the flag, the sort of nationalist flag stuff.
Yeah.
I went to visit my sister in Epping a couple of weeks ago, and she lives a block from the Bell Hotel, the famous Bell Hotel. And I went for a run from her house down to the forest past the hotel, and the atmosphere was horrible. And I'm quite steeled to that sort of sense. But it to me, as a white middle-class English-speaking woman, it felt dangerous. Not from the people in the hotel, but from the people who were standing outside pubs, and the signs that were up everywhere, and the flags and things that had obviously been like kicked in and things like that. It just felt really nasty. And I was like, this has happened in the space of months. Epping didn't feel like this when my sister moved here.
It's a very, it's very, very weird what's happening. So it's happening kind of from the other side as well. So, as you know, I do triathlon, and friends and I, we kind of there's something called age group teams. So when I say we represent Britain on the world stage, sometimes we do that in our age groups. So we're not like pretending to be Olympic athletes, but we do compete for this thing called
your national
And part of that, if you want to, you can get hold of a swimming costume which has the British flag on it because it's your team costume. Anyway, a friend of mine was telling me only this morning that they were wearing one of these lovely costumes with the British flag on it, and they got accused of being a Tommy Robinson supporter.
Oh, no.
They were attacked
Oh
by other
no.
swimmers for wearing a British flag on their swimming costume.
Yeah.
And they'd been proud to be British, but they weren't being British in terms of being, racist and nationalistic and
Yeah.
anti-immigrant or anything like that. It was just simply
Yeah.
from a sporting prowess point of view.
Because the flag has been co-opted. It's
It's
really
been
interesting.
co-opted, yeah.
In Amsterdam, I spoke on a panel, and one of the questions that we got was, do you think that the pride flag, that rainbow flag,
Yeah.
is a political symbol, and therefore should it be allowed in churches? And I really thought about it, and then I was like, no, I think it's an icon in the Catholic sense. I then had to backtrack because I was speaking to a lot of European Protestants, and I was like, I mean, a good icon, not a bad icon. I was like, for the LGBTQ community, it's imbued with a sort of religious, devotional sense. Now, it has become political, I think, by a community other than the community that uses it.
Yeah.
I think with LGBTQ people, it's not a political symbol. It didn't begin as a political symbol. It began as a sort of symbol of identity, allyship, solidarity, devotion. And so for me, it has as much place in a church as any other symbol of devotion. And the same thing with the flag. When you're competing, you wear a swimsuit like that because it's imbued with your identity and the challenge and why you're doing it. I think those things become unpleasantly political when other groups appropriate them.
Yes.
So,
And I do think that you're right. This has been happening, and there's parts of the country where the flashpoints are very easily ignitable at the moment, and things could really go up. It wouldn't take much for as there to be something serious happening at the moment. I think it's not a good atmosphere out there.
no. And I think it was interesting. A lot of the people in Amsterdam were from countries in Eastern Europe. And one of the reasons I had to be so cautious with the news story was because there were quite a few people who couldn't be identified as having been there because it would be really dangerous for them.
Yeah.
And about halfway through, I suddenly realised that, one of my greatest points of solidarity with some of these groups is what's going on with the far right in England, But while people agreed, and that was sort of reflected back, everybody was so delighted by the Church of England, because I think we were there as Sarah Mullally's appointment was. So they were sort of saying, well, at least in your church and your country, women can be leaders, like women can be archbishops. And I was like, well, that's true.
Yes. So yeah, it's very exciting that the Church of England has chosen her, and I remember when we were speculating on the runners and riders, as we always do in the run-up to this. She wasn't really considered a serious contender because of some of the safeguarding issues that have existed in the London diocese, where she's been bishop for a while. Even though, there was no indication of any wrongdoing by her. And these issues were there nevertheless. And she also has been very kind of taking responsibility for everything, unlike those other people who kind of seem to avoid doing.
No comment.
So she obviously acquitted herself very well in the interviews and everything. And I think, I think she is a nurse. She's a former nurse, and she's going to nurse the Church of England back to health.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
I am so happy to have this opportunity to ask you about this, Ruth, because I've been dying. I've got all these questions, and you're such an amazing authority. I'm delighted that she's been appointed. I think it's completely wonderful. I was also staggered because what does this mean for like the suffrage and bishopric? Is this as huge of a split as it might look like, or do they just think people get used to it?
What do you mean, the suffrage and bishopric? Sorry.
Well, isn't there a sort of a
You mean these
segment
flying,
of
these flying bishop
the
things?
flying bishops, yeah,
Yeah.
where they have to be ordained by a man,
Yeah,
and,
right. You
yeah,
mean
and that
yeah,
has gone.
these anti-women people?
Yeah.
Or, well, they would deny being anti-women. They would say they were pro apostolic succession and authority, and Catholic way really. They don't want to break.
But doesn't this sort of like sever that whole line? Because now there is no.
Well, it's quite interesting that some of the people most welcoming of her, because London is one of the dioceses where the divides have been biggest, and there's been the highest number really or there's one of the largest numbers of churches that do take this traditionalist line and do opt for the care of episcopal visitors or whatever they're called now, and what used to be known as flying bishops.
Flying bishops, yeah.
And but she's done so well in London that they were all singing her praises. And I think that's one of the reasons again that she was chosen, is because even the people who you would think would be her oppositions and her enemies are not, are very much on her side. So I think she's been a great pastor in London and has really kept the diocese united.
Yeah.
And has been very healing in the way she's led the diocese.
Yeah.
And she has allowed both the traditionalist side, the traditionalists, and the evangelicals, so Holy Trinity Brompton and the others more Calvinist churches, to thrive under her leadership. Even though she herself is really from the liberal Catholic tradition of the Church of England.
And where do these appointments come from? Because I know the language is around sort of crown appointments, crown nominations. But where, has this come from the king? Is this something that could have been blocked by the royal family, or is it something that maybe has been encouraged?
Well, the king has to, it's a royal appointment in the end. Well, Downing Street appoints, but the king as Supreme Governor of the Church of England kind of is the ultimate, But if he tried to stop it or block it, there would be a constitutional crisis.
Yeah,
Be able to do that, and even if the Prime Minister tried to, there would be, and the rules would change slightly so that the Prime Minister actually would find it very difficult to do that. After Margaret Thatcher was believed to have blocked the appointment, I think, of Mark Santa, who was Bishop of Birmingham, to be Archbishop of Canterbury, because she thought he was too left-wing. She didn't like his views, and I think he'd been quite a critic. That meant the rules would change. So now, although it is still the established church, and the former head of MI5 was in charge of the Crown Nominations Commission, I think the success of Sarah Mullally in being selected, the success of Sarah, but the success of the church in managing to elect Sarah Mullally, choose Sarah Mullally, her election technically is in January, is really because the church has been allowed to do it from the grassroots upwards. And the gradual changes to the process that have taken place over the last few decades, really, and few archbishops of Canterbury have facilitated that. I think for the first time, this is the first time I felt that the process has really worked really well. And I think the final change to it that really helped to deliver a good outcome this time, besides the chair of the commission being the person they were, is the fact that they were, for the first time, they had proper representation from the Anglican Communion. Yeah, so instead of the Anglican Communion being presented to these meetings, these secret meetings, 3 meetings at least, I think, in all, in a secret location, as being something that was really conservative and opposed to anything, remotely liberal or whatever. You had a much more measured and considered and complex view, because you had the actual people from the communion itself on the commission. So, not all African provinces are opposed to women priests.
Yeah.
Or women bishops, not all of them. Yeah. And so Africa, for example, which is often cited as a place of great conservative evangelical opinion, is not that. It's much more complex than that. There are a lot of people in African provinces support the election of Sarah Malali. Now, Liz, I can hear a noise, and I think that might be your robot vacuum.
Trying to fling itself off another cliff. Yeah, it's very possible.
Or into the podcast, and we are going to talk about it, aren't we? Anyway, because you have got a robot vacuum cleaner. So does this make you a Mary or a Martha?
Oh, that's a very good question. I think it probably makes me a Lazarus. I just sort of lie down and let things happen around me. Yeah, it's fascinating. It's a sort of step into a whole new modern world for me. So I was convinced by my sister in Epping, who has one that is tormented really by my two nephews, but she said, it does a good job. I had lots of logistical issues because we're a kind of multi-storey building and we're a very big building as well. So I got a very base level model just to test it out. And it's one of the most amazing things I've ever seen. So it has its flaws. For example, occasionally trying to fling itself off steps like it's thing to do at the moment or whatever it's up to.
Does it have legs and things, or does it just kind of... Does it look like an ordinary vacuum cleaner?
It's a disc. I would get it, but I think that would just... I don't know what it would do. It's a sort of dinner plate sized disc that's quite thick and has I think it's got a camera on top so it can see where it's going, and then it's got sonar somewhere in it so it can sort of make sure it doesn't bump into stuff. But I was watching it, once it's plotted a room and remembered where obstacles are, it then manoeuvres around most of the time with the most alarming precision. And I watched it reversing out of a space with like millimeters on either side, and it reminded me I've got a community car now that I've passed my test, and the car I have will park itself. So if I align it right and I tell it I want to parallel park in this space, it uses the same technology, sort of cameras and sonar, to slot itself way better than I can do.
Well, this
so
is
I was watching this robot and I was like, well, I suppose if my car can fit into a parking space safely, then you can reverse out from behind that chair.
So where does it, if it's just a dinner plate, where does it put all the dirt?
Oh, it's good. So it's a sort of thick dinner plate. It's got maybe that much, what's that, like 20 centimetres depth?
It's got a bag in there or something.
Yeah, it's got a sort of tray.
Yeah.
Which seems to, I suppose because it's quite a big dinner plate, and I suppose the tray extends through most of it, so it sort of absorbs.
So it's kind of eating it, really. So it's having the dirt on it.
Yeah. What it really likes to eat is cables. Not dust. Favourite thing is cables. And it mops as well. One of the great... So you can imagine what an adjustment this is for my two sisters who've spent 80-something years doing their own mopping and vacuuming and would probably quite like to carry on doing it. And now this little dinner plate is floating around the house.
Mops.
But they've really taken to it.
And does it work? I mean, does it look clean afterwards?
Yeah, so it got the seal of approval from my sister Margaret, who followed it round to check that it was doing a good job, and she was satisfied it was, so she went and let it go. I'm the one who's cranky about it. We've got a lot of, I haven't got one in here, but we've got a lot of these particular IKEA chairs that are sort of like S-shaped, but have a bracket on the back, and it really loves trying to climb the bracket and then flipping onto its back and sort of waving its feet in the air.
Can it right itself if it goes on its back? Is it like a turtle? Does it get stuck?
It is, it's stuck. You have to go and get it. And, for a nun who should be detached from technology, the amount of my life that is now completely dependent on phone notifications. If the iRobot falls off a cliff, I get a notification. If I accidentally leave the window open in the car or leave the car unlocked, I get a notification. So I'm sort of like, I'm more hooked. If I go on, the next time I go on retreat and I have to turn my phone off, it's going to be a disaster, you know.
Can it
There'll
go
be
down?
robots driving the car.
Can it go up and downstairs? On its
No.
own? No.
No, it can't. It can go over small ledges, but that's almost more perilous. The last time I had to rescue it, it was trying to climb into the fireplace because its top camera could see space, and then there was a sort of blind spot where the ridge was in the brickwork. So it was slamming itself against the bricks to try and get into this space and clean
My
it.
goodness, how hilarious.
I know.
So how long have you had this now?
A week. I had it delivered right as I got back from Amsterdam.
So now after a week, do you like it? What's your verdict?
I've become really attached to it. I've given it a name, so it's part of the family now. And when it has repeat jobs, little tasks, it's really good. So we have a guest kitchen for our younger guests who are experiencing homelessness, and that tends to get quite ratty most days. And I'm part of that because I leave crumbs everywhere. So every day at 9 p.m, the robot goes in and just does a sweep and a mop, and it's amazing. It just keeps on top. It leaves it at a sort of manageable level. Bigger tasks, like today it's learning the other side of the house for the first time, drive me crazy. Honestly, I've spent half the day following it around, rescuing it from situations that it's got itself into. So I think it's great for when it's set up and it's established and it knows its regular jobs, amazing. But it's got a bit of a learning curve. But in our situation, because we have vulnerable people staying in the house, it was quite difficult to arrange, and it's a big property with lots of people coming in and out, so we did need help with the cleaning. But trying to arrange that in a way that complied with safeguarding legislation, and also our schedules are very mixed, was getting really challenging. So I was like, well, the robot doesn't need a DBS check and it'll just trundle around in the middle of the night. So
Amazing. When my father was a vicar, and when he wasn't the best driver. He was one of these people who, in his national service, got his licence. So I don't think you even had to do a test to do that. You just got basically given a licence as long as you could turn on the car or something.
wow.
So his driving it did always reflect that, and he was a great believer in prayer. So often he would kind of get lost in prayer while he was driving. And I remember once he was doing this, well, not just once, but once when one time vividly stands out when he would just drive out into the road, and we got hit on both sides by cars coming from both opposite directions, came right into us. And actually, we were all completely unscathed, although our car was pretty much written off. But one of them was quite badly hurt. So what you're saying about your smart car and your smart vacuum makes me think, this is perfect for not just religious people, but for anybody out there who kind of in driving, because the car car can stay alert, and it wouldn't let you do that, would it?
No. And the car that I'm driving has already saved me a number of times, and I have a real sentimentality here because one of my CSJP sisters died about 3-4 weeks ago, Sister Mary Doyle.
Oh, I'm sorry about that.
She'd had a fantastic, she'd been in Cameroon, she was such a wonderful woman, and she'd been really invested in my journey learning to drive. And I think she died the day before my test.
Oh.
So she became my intercessor. And I think I passed my test because of Sister Mary Doyle. I'm convinced. So I called the car Doyle. So all my notifications say things like Doyle has a window open and things like that. So now, whenever the car saves me, so yesterday I'd gone running, I got stuck in a very narrow road with a truck trying to come down it. and I had to reverse back onto a grass verge and then back beyond what I could see, and the car went back and then stopped like this, centimetres away from a bollard I would have smashed into. And I was like, Doyle, Sister Mary Doyle, through the car has saved me from totaling my first ever community car that I feel very protective of and responsible for.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's fascinating how, technology, which, like so many people of my generation, can be like unsettling, even frightening sometimes, can actually make a difference for the better.
Yeah, and I think there's all sorts of, and Pope Leo is very strong on the moral debates around AI and artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
And I get a nasty feeling whenever I remember that the technology that the robot cleaner uses, and probably the technology the car uses, is also probably used in quite a lot of military equipment and manufacture. That feels, there's a thing in ethics, isn't there, about dual use. And I think there's probably something to be unpicked in the Catholic tradition about how artificial intelligence is fantastic when it saves you from smashing your car into a wall, and when it helps you keep a community together and clean and rested. But it can also be used in really nasty and insidious ways as well.
Yeah,
I mean, I've been balance of that.
I've been having terrible trouble getting some things delivered recently. A certain delivery company that I won't name, I've decided that I'll never ever buy anything online from any company that uses this service again. It's just too stressful trying to retrieve the parcel from whichever obscure depot they've abandoned it in.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, well, it'd be so much easier if a drone could just drop it off outside the front door. But I've also been reading this week about the actual nightmarish situations in Ukraine on the front line, where you hear the sound of a drone coming and there's no escape, and the kind of nightmarish, futuristic, well, they're not futuristic, it's in the present now, it's with us, of these machines, and unescapable machines, and you can't shoot them down or do anything about them almost half the time, and just a death sentence, flying in the sky towards you.
Yeah, that's it. Like I watched this robot reversing backwards around a corner because it's memorised the route, and I think that's the same tech that an unmanned tank uses when it's, going through a city and levelling it.
Yeah,
It's difficult, isn't it? But I think that's part of Dilexit Te, that we are people with a moral conscience. And we can't close our eyes to progress, economic or technological. So our role is to be in solidarity with vulnerable communities, finding the best way for those resources, financial, technological, whatever, to be used for human flourishing.
Yeah,
that's social justice.
Do you think that your car and your vacuum could ever have an intelligence of the kind that would mean they were entitled to rights?
I grew up on Star Trek, so yes. I fall immediately into the yes, and I'm incredibly sentimental, and I could anthropomorphisize my cup of coffee. So I already think that the robot vacuum cleaner has a personality, and clearly I think that the car is a reincarnation of my sister. So I don't know, what do I do one day when the robot says to me, I'm too tired to clean, or I want to be a sculptor?
Ask for a minimum wage.
But I think this is exactly. Like, workers' rights and technology is another really complicated area.
If machines are intelligent and we use them for menial jobs, is this enslavement?
Is it? Exactly. And at what point do we start deeming that something has consciousness? If you like science fiction, this is a fantastic mental world to play in. But I think, for me, having an authentic sense of moral and spiritual integrity that comes from things like Catholic worker, social justice, that sort of thing, means that I hope I can point that lens in different directions. So if one day the robot vacuum cleaner said, look, do you know what, I really want to be a writer, or I want someone, or I want to go to the cinema. I would, I would have a conscience formed enough to say, okay, or if the robot cleaner and the car wanted to unionise, I'd be in favour of that.
Or get married.
Or get married, yeah. I think morality is morality, and love is love, and ethics are ethics. And that's one thing that doesn't make me feel too knocked off course by these changes. Because
Yes,
as long as you look at everything through that same lens of justice and love.
yeah, that's very interesting. That's actually a really good way of looking at it.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you can feel totally derailed and, totally thrown by it and kind of think, oh, the only way to deal with this is just try and have nothing at all to do with it.
That's it. But if you can have faith in the sort of the well springs of your own and your own tradition's goodness, then you've always got a way to react. Yeah. You just love everything and everyone. And then if your robot vacuum cleaner unionises, great. If the people down the road in the coffee shop unionise, fantastic.
Well, I'll tell you something about Sarah Mullally, which you might be interested to hear, which I heard from a source. It's not appeared anywhere in print yet, but apparently she loves cycling.
Does she?
Yeah. And I don't know how far this goes or what kind of cycling it is, whether it's club cycling or something, more dynamic or whatever. Not that club cycling isn't dynamic. Not in my club anyway. But the way we whiz along those roads. But apparently she's a great cyclist.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah. So
I'm interested to know about that.
Yeah, so if I ever get the chance to interview her, then I will definitely ask her about that.
Do, because it's a great insight into someone's personality. If she cycles around London,
yeah,
that is a particular kind of woman, I can tell you. And if she goes on sort of long bike tours and does the sort of camping side of it as well, that tells you something too. How interesting. And if she does the racing, the sort of cycling that you can do, then
well I do triathlon, but that's there's no drafting in most triathlons. In sprint triathlon now you can draft sometimes, but in most of the triathlons I do, there's no drafting. So it's not like the peloton in the Tour de France,
Wow. Terrifying.
Which is terrifying. I'm not sure I would ever be up for that.
Maybe you'll meet her on Zwift one day. Maybe you're competing with her without knowing.
Yeah, well, on my various wearables and apps and things, of course, I have had a quick look. I'm sure.
Good for you.
I think she's probably very well hidden in those places if she's there at all.
Wouldn't that be wonderful if you suddenly saw that the next Queen of the Mountain near you was brackets BBC?
Yeah, on a map. It would be fantastic.
Yeah. Go and take it off if it was a Queen of the Mountain or a segment or something like that, and then wait and doorstep when she came to take it back.
I mean, several bishops in the Church of England do parkrun.
Do they?
Yeah, women bishops actually, and I know some male priests who do parkrun and marathons and things. But I don't know any Catholic bishops who do much sport at all. Actually.
No, I don't.
Maybe the bit of golf here and there.
And I don't think I know any nuns who do parkrun. I don't do it because it's too early for me on a weekend.
Yeah, that's your one line, I guess. You're up probably at the crack of dawn most days.
Exactly, and then Sundays we have commitments in the parish and stuff like that. So getting across town for a 9 a.m. hilly parkrun in Nottingham as well is. I go out later in the day and I do a long, slow run.
Yeah.
Under my own steam, but
Jolly good. So, we'll say goodbye now. Wish me luck in my high rocks next week.
Good luck. Is it next week?
Yeah, in Birmingham.
Wow. Oh, good luck. I hope it goes well. How's the training gone?
Better than expected, but not as well as it could have done. I have been, work's been very busy, and obviously that's the priority. And I have been finding it difficult. I've had a couple of episodes of not being 100% well, so it's quite difficult to keep it up.
Yeah.
So, but it's not too bad.
And you're doing it as a team, right?
I'm doing it with a doubles partner, yeah.
Yeah, that'll be great.
Yeah.
Oh, excited. Well, let us know how it goes.
I will. And good luck with your running and stuff.
Thank you. And my robot, who I now have to go and rescue from somewhere. or the nun who's fallen over it that I probably have to go and rescue as well.
And we'll talk again soon. We'll talk about your book that's coming out soon. There's lots to look
coming out
forward to.
in December, I think. So just starting to do the press and marketing for that now.
Thank you for listening, and please join us next time. If you're not already a subscriber, please consider subscribing to The Tablet, thetablet.co.uk/subscribe, or you can sign up to our free weekly newsletter by visiting the website, scrolling down to the bottom, and you'll find a form there to sign up to our twice weekly free newsletter. See you next time. Goodbye.